Hello, everyone. Thank you. It's an honor to be here. And by the crowd size, it seems like people were partying too hard last night. But, I'm going to go through these slides really quick because when it's a smaller group like this, I really want to have a good Q&A. Before I get started, I just want to ask, how many people here are actually devs? Yeah. And then, are anyone out here investors? Cool. All right. So I kind of want to talk a little bit over what we're seeing in the VR and AR landscape right now. And for the longest time, the Q1, people were very harsh in saying the winter is coming. But then I wanted to show that there was a little groundhog showing that there's a bright future ahead, that the spring is finally here. No? No? Oh, oops, went back. All right. For those that don't know me, my name is Tipatat Chennavasin. I founded the VR fund, or the Venture Reality Fund, about a year and a half ago with my partner, Marco Demiris. We're a $50 million fund focused on early-stage AR and VR investments. So we're the largest fund that invests only in software that's independent, not corporate-owned. My background, though, I actually don't come from the finance world. I come from being a developer. So I have a UX background, computer graphics background, and prototyping. I also have been investing and advising VR startups for a little over 2 years now. And at this point, I've talked to over 2,200 companies in the VR AR space all around the world. We've made 20 investments so far with the VR fund, mostly in software companies, but anything from deep technology like computer vision, platforms and tools. There's a really great animation program using VR called Mindshow. I hope you all will check it out. It's pretty fun. And then also even game studios. So Alchemy Labs was one of our early investments, and they were acquired by Google earlier this year. And then also Rec Room. So yeah. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm going to be really bad with this. So earlier in this year, there was a lot of talk about how disappointing VR headset sales were. And honestly, I think it was twofold. One, analysts had overhyped adoption of VR, thinking that would go much faster than it really could. And so, I remember seeing numbers like, 10, 20 million high-end VR headsets in the first year, and it was like they couldn't actually create the OLED panels fast enough to even do those kinds of sales. And so one thing I would say is that adoption has been a little slower than what we would have liked, but at the same time, hardware sales is just one part of the equation. The other thing that really is important to look at is software sales and how are startups doing in this ecosystem. And that is actually very interesting. So even with a relatively small install base of roughly 500,000 Vives, we're seeing over 18 SteamVR titles had sold over 1 million. And this data was put a couple months ago. And since then, there's actually been at least another 2 or 3 more titles that have done over 1 million in revenue. And then 6 of those have done over 2 million in revenue. And in the Oculus store, there's been over 4 titles that have sold over 1 million. And so what this means is that if you're a small, scrappy startup, and your production budget was under 1 million, you could actually be break even or even profitable. And what's really great about this is almost all the companies that I talked to spent nothing on marketing. So for you guys that are coming from mobile, you can't even launch a mobile title right now because there's like 1,000 apps launched a day, and you need a marketing spend that's at least 1 million, if not more, and oftentimes just as large or larger than your production budget. It's pretty sad. So VR is actually in this really unique space right now. And then what's also happening is Oculus, Vive, and Sony have all done price cuts. And so they've all dramatically reduced the cost of getting a VR headset. And you've seen that really spike the sales data. And some people were saying, oh, they're doing this because VR headsets aren't selling fast enough. Actually, I really think the reason they were doing this was because the Windows MR, or technically VR headsets that are going to come out in October, they're only going to start at $299. And Microsoft is working with companies like Acer, Asus, Dell, HP, Lenovo. They're each doing their own headset. And it uses inside-out tracking. It's really inexpensive, and it works great. And so I feel like Oculus definitely was not worried so much about HTC, but was worried about these new headsets coming into the market. And while these are primarily focused at enterprise, Microsoft just announced that they will support SteamVR. So this will be another huge opportunity within the market. And we're going to see that the numbers of headsets are going to spike. The other thing that's really interesting is that VR arcades are booming. So IMAX VR had a successful LA pilot. Now they're going to roll out worldwide. And they've actually created a $100 million content fund to fund. So game developers, think about this. If you're building something for a VR arcade, then you can potentially get project funding from IMAX and others. Also, Namco VR Zone has been a huge success in Japan, and they're working with partners like Nintendo, and they have this Mario Kart VR thing that has been sold out and over capacity and looks amazing. And I want to fly to Japan just to play it. Also, Disney invested in a company called The Void, and they're going to do Star Wars in high-end VR at a VR arcade location. And what you can see now, what I was trying to show was that Nintendo, Disney, and Star Wars, some of the biggest brands in the world are now seriously focused on VR as well. And then a company called MGM partnering with Zero Latency. And I think at the last count I saw, there are over 12,000 VR arcades in China, VR arcades and cafes in China. So you can see huge growth in the VR arcade space. So the other thing a lot of analysts were saying was that, when they looked at the Q1 data, they were like, oh my gosh, investment in VR seems to be faltering, or people are moving away from VR and AR investments. And part of that was they compared Q1 of 2017 to Q1 of 2016. And the thing to note about Q1 2016 was $800 million of that went to one company called Magic Leap. So it was artificially inflating that left-hand side. And you can kind of see that holding true for Q2, Q3. So what was really interesting, though, is when you looked at Q2 of 2017, all of a sudden that was huge and spiky. And that was because there's two investments in a company called Improbable in the UK and a company called Unity that you guys should know very well. And what I really wanted to show with this is, the analysts, they're just writing clickbait shit all the time. Don't pay attention to that. The most important thing, if you really wanted to look at it, is, okay, what's going on over a period of time, and not just how much money is going into it, but how many deals are being done. And if you really look at the data, you'll see that it's actually a pretty healthy and vibrant ecosystem. The other data I'd want to talk about, too, is funds like mine, specifically created to invest in the ecosystem. There's probably another 5 to 10 VR-focused funds that I've met globally, and not to mention the incubators and accelerators. So I just came 3 days ago was a mentor day for the Nordic VR startups. There's also at this point I've counted at least 10 to 15 VR and AR incubator accelerator programs around the world, and you're talking about more and more regular accelerators are excited and accepting VR and AR companies as well. So we're seeing a huge growth of an interest in VR and AR investments worldwide. The other thing that I think is very important is always look at what the big players are doing and how they're messaging their developers, because it always starts with devs, right? And so you can see at F8, NVIDIA's GTC conference, Google I/O, Microsoft Build, and at the Apple conference, VR, AR, and AI were all the main themes. And you can see this repeated again and again at Apple's event, and it's just crazy. Even though it's still early in the industry, every single major technology company is heavily investing and heavily pushing on this, because they know this is not just about games and entertainment, but this is the next generation. This is the future vision of what computing will look like. And this is how we're going to not just play, but also work, communicate, learn. Right? The other thing, so we as the VR Fund, because we talk to so many companies, one of the things that we do to help the community get better educated is we put out this VR landscape. And so 2016, that was what the landscape looked like. And this doesn't mean every company, but these are the major players. Companies that have raised over $1 million funding, have over $1 million revenue, or have major mainstream press. And what we've seen is significant growth in just 1 year, especially on the applications and content side. And the way this breaks down is, the bottom layer is the hardware infrastructure, and so these are the HMDs and the display and the input. The middle layer is the content development tools, content creation tools, and content distribution platforms. And then on top of that is the software applications. And of course, games is a big, heavy focus, entertainment's a big, heavy focus, but we see amazing things in enterprise and healthcare, social, education, journalism, right? Those are all hot spots. And what's also interesting, if you look across these boards, you'll see not just a lot of startups, but also a lot of larger companies now are jumping into VR and AR. Now, if we contrast what's going on with VR and AR right now, so this is the AR industry landscape, and you can see it's much smaller because it's much more nascent. VR headsets are shipped. There's people actually buying not just headset but software as well, like I mentioned. And you can see what I tell people is that right now VR is looking for the killer application that's going to drive consumer and enterprise adoption. Right? The hardware's ready. We just need the software to catch up. AR is on the exact opposite. For devs right now, it's confusing. You're like, oh, if I want to do AR, what platform do I do? Do I do HoloLens or the vaporware of Magic Leap? I can't even get a dev kit. Or do I look at these mobile AR things now with ARKit and AR Core? And there's just a lot of market confusion what even the form factor is going to be like for AR. And so until that gets stabilized, it's going to be hard to build the software applications. But I think because of ARKit and AR Core, we're going to see this really grow on the top layer over the next couple months. But that brings up the question, the AR platform wars. This is kind of where we're in right now. So in April, Mark Zuckerberg talked to all the Facebook developers at F8, said, hey, we're making the camera the first augmented reality platform, saying that through the Facebook camera app on your mobile device, you can now create very simple mobile AR experiences. Oh, sorry, I don't know why the text got screwed up, but a month later in May, Apple came out and said, hey, no, hundreds of millions of iPhones will support ARKit, making iOS the largest AR platform in the world. And the ARKit demos have been great. Developers have really been rushing to it, and it's actually available today now, which is pretty awesome. But then in August, Google came out and said, hey, Apple, hold my beer. We have 2 billion active devices. Android is the largest mobile platform in the world. AR Core is this next step in bringing AR to everyone. And so, now, honestly, analysts are getting super excited about AR. But I think that we're in danger of analysts overhyping AR just like they had done VR. And one of the things I wanted to talk about was the difference between mobile AR and then these high-end AR, AR eyewear, AR HMDs. Mobile AR does have a lot of advantages. It is available today, actually. That's crazy. It works on your existing device. So ARKit, I think, is like 6S Plus. So any iPhone, it's not just about the next iPhone you buy, but as long as you upgrade to the newest iOS and have a 6S or later, then you're going to be able to use ARKit apps. But the problem is, twofold. One, low immersion. You're still kind of doing this like magic window thing, and it's not really completely immersing you into the digital world. But actually, the second part, which I think is more important, VR and AR is not just what you see, but also how you interact with the world. And the magic, especially of great VR experiences, is when it's natural and intuitive. When you see something, you reach out and you grab it, right? You don't have to learn how to interact with it. It just behaves like the real world. And so for ARKit, as long as you're still using the touchscreen as the interface, I think it's still going to limit a lot of the functionality. I'm not saying that a lot of people can't create great apps, but I think there's going to be a handful of apps instead of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of very useful apps. And I think the other thing that people aren't really talking about too is with ARKit, AR Core, how are you going to do app discovery? You're still an app in the App Store. You're still fighting against the thousands of apps being released a day. There's not going to be a top grossing for AR apps in the App Store. It's just going to be top grossing, right? They might have one little spotlight section, but again, that's just not that great visibility. And so you really have to build virality. And I think most importantly, you have to build value into your apps. I think a lot of people right now have just been building novelty. If you look at most of the ARKit, like the first batch of ARKit stuff that comes out there, you'll load it once. You'll think, oh, hey, this is kind of cool. You might show it to a friend. You probably will never open it again. And I think really what we have to do, and we saw this with VR as well, right? Like when VR first came out, there were a lot of complaints about tech demos. It's pushing beyond the novelty and really trying to find the value. And that's going to be the key to the success for both VR and AR. So that's all I really wanted to say formally. I wanted to leave some time, so we have 5 minutes for questions. But the thing, super easy. Follow me on Twitter. I spend way too much time on Twitter, but that's how you can stay up to date on the latest, what's happening in VR and AR. And also our website, TheVRFund.com, it lists high-resolution versions of those industry landscapes, and we update those constantly. And then we actually have Trello board too that lists even more companies and is a better full view of the landscape. So 5 minutes for Q&A. Let's do it.
Great. So some questions from the audience. We've got a mic running around. Okay. Introduce yourself when you ask the question.
Hi, that was great. Thank you. I'm John Dean from Gov1 Digital Consulting. So we're all here. We're all looking for the next big opportunity, and investors like yourself. So what are you looking for when you look to invest?
Sure.
I mean, you've told us kind of where we've been.
Yeah.
What do you look for?
So, I mean, for us too, it's always like, why VR, why AR? Is this really transformative? Does this really do something that couldn't have been done without the technology? That's core. I'll give you a quick example. So we invested in a healthcare company, and they're called Vivid Visions. So the founder had lazy eye, and so that means one eye is weaker than the other. And he created a VR game that was an exercise, an eye exercise, and he went from 70/20 vision to 20/20 vision in 6 months. And what was really interesting was, so he took some seed money, he took out to about 70 clinics, treated about 2,500 patients, found out that the program he created was 60% effective in treating ambliosis or diplopia. Now, what's really interesting is the current method is just like a paper exercise. They just, you just read the instructions, you kind of like look around. That's about 40% effective, but only works for kids, for juveniles. For adults, it becomes 0% effective, and then the only option for some adults is surgery. What he found with the VR training was adults and kids, it was 60% effective across the board. And so now you're giving the opportunity for adults who had no real options a treatment. And so that, to me, was one of those like groundbreaking uses where it's like, okay, this is going beyond just, hey, isn't this neat, isn't this cool, to, oh my gosh, this is potentially changing the world. Now, on the gaming side, since I know a lot of you guys are gamers, our investment in Alchemy Labs was another example of this. A lot of people are trying to build games in VR, but what we really need are VR games. And the difference is, I feel like, and this is true of every media. Every time we have some new media, right? Like when we first created film cameras, people just filmed stage plays, and that was, the movies of that time. Even the idea of a movie didn't exist, right? And only through 100 years of like really refining it did we, close-ups and special effects and all that noise. But people looked at Job Simulator when it was first being revealed, and and a lot of hardcore devs, my good friends that I respect and love and make some of my favorite games, looked at it and kind of shitted all over it and was like, what is this? The graphics suck. It doesn't even look like a game. Like, this makes no sense. All right, like, why is the press loving it? I was like, well, have you played it? And they're like, no, but I've seen it. I don't. And that's the whole point. It's like seeing a little video of something doesn't explain. Like in VR, the feeling of presence, how interactive things are, and how, emergent gameplay and all these other things. Like, how do you get there? That's something that the Alchemy Labs team was able to figure out way before anyone else, and that's why Google was interested in them. And and it wasn't just this theoretical exercise. It was also in the numbers. They were one of the best-selling VR games. Beating out AAA-looking games like Batman and all these other things that were coming out that looked great, had that AAA polish, but honestly didn't really embrace the presence and the interactivity that VR can provide. And so, I think they announced, even before they launched Rick and Morty, but just with Job Simulator, they'd made over $3 million in VR, which is probably one of the highest grossing independent VR games that are out there.
Question down here.
Sorry.
Ross Finman, Escher Reality. Great talk, and really love your Twitter. Quick question. What do you view are the main barriers for augmented reality over the next 12 to 24 months for developers and for the ecosystem?
Sure. I think the overhyping of ARKit and ARCore is one of the biggest problems. I think people are quickly going to find there's a limit to how much interactivity they can really do, and getting to the thing of like, why are you even doing this in ARKit, ARCore? Like a lot of them, I see these examples, and it's like you just remove the background, and yeah, I can see your camera vision, but that doesn't make the game any better or any more interesting, or there's no functionality. So trying to find that repeatability, that retention. I think that's going to be pretty hard, and I feel like that's going to be one of the biggest challenges. And I think, too, this appetite of, as we, will it be this thing where, kind of like what happened with cardboard, people tried AR, Kit, AR Core, and a bad experience and said, okay, you know what? Yeah, I get it. Whatever. Moving on. As saying, like, wait, Like, no, you haven't really tried it until you've tried it in a HoloLens or a Magic Leap and really seen what's possible once you can see a hologram, manipulate it with your hands, and really do something unique. So I think that's like the biggest. And I think for developers, I think the biggest thing is going to be marketing and discoverability, right? If you're going into the regular app store, I worry about that a lot. And I think I have seen already people get pretty excited. Like some of these AR apps can go viral, but the thing I worry about is you're a small developer, you create something cool, but again it spikes up, you start getting a little bit of revenue. But the big guys see it, they can fast follow, and they stick it through their marketing machine, and they can get the app installs way better, and will drown you out eventually. Like that's the thing I kind of worry about, as if I was talking to small indie developers thinking about AR right now. Like the one thing I would say too is like, if you look at VR versus AR, right now in VR, there's less numbers, less people, but the people are spending. If you create a great high-quality VR experience for HTC Vive or for the Sony PlayStation, there's a good chance that it's going to do well, especially because you're competing against way less apps. No one's figured out how to do marketing in VR and AR yet, in VR, and so there's no real marketing spend, and so I feel like that's the real opportunity for a small indie developer. Okay, I think that's